Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we are going to be building another of these little mini dioramas. As you can see in front of me, I have a selection that I've built over the last few months and I'm really pleased with how they are looking. On the left we have the Star Trek the Motion Picture bridge that I built for the Mego figures. At the back on the left we have Disney's The Black Hole. Then on the back right we have a little Star Wars mini diorama that was used to display my Hanon Carbonite block. And then on the right I have one that I can use for displaying Indiana Jones figures, or alternatively displaying Advanced Dungeons and Dragons figures, because the background on that one is interchangeable. And as you can see, some of these have lights and some of them don't have lights. I think they all work really well. And in today's video we are going to be making a new mini diorama for the Tron figures by Tomy, and that will contain a few ideas from all of these dioramas to make something special that makes those figures really stand out. So here we have the 4 figures from Tron. These were made by Tomy back in 1983, and the great thing about them is that they are made out of a clear plastic, so I'm thinking that if we put a light underneath them, the figures will start to glow and they will look even better than they do currently. So my plan is to take one of the bases that I've already made, modify it in such a way that I can add 4 LED sort of pads underneath the figures, and then have a background that we can swap in and out. You'll have seen me make something similar with this Indiana Jones background. The idea with this is we had a base, fairly simple base, but the backdrop was interchangeable. We could just slot them in, and that's what I'm going to be using to make this Tron one. Although as you can see, we need to modify the bottom of this because we've got to make more space to put lights in it and also store a battery. So I've done a few little diagrams. Let's take a look at those and see what we need to make. So here we go. Here are the little diagrams that I drew up. I'm going to try and keep the proportions the same as the other bases, because all of the bases are made roughly the same, so they sort of sit together very nicely. So the width of this one is 24 centimeters. So my plan is to make a 24 centimeter wide block. I'm not going to do these steps at the front. I'm going to extend it and just add a sort of diagonal piece down. But the top section needs to be made out of a clear sheet of Perspex rather than the styrene sheet that I've used here. And then underneath, I plan to add 4 LEDs in this sort of pattern, with the battery stored at the back. Now the battery I'm planning to use is a PP3 battery, which is this one, and these are slightly deeper than the base, so I'm going to have to raise that base up a little bit, and I've worked out that I can fit it in about 22 millimeters of height, so that will be the height that we're using. And then the back of it will be the same construction, so we need to add this slot in, which is where the piece of cardboard is inserted, and I can then change the backgrounds. I think it will look really quite nice, because the idea will be that we have LEDs pointing upwards, and each of the figure stands on one of those LEDs and gets lit up. So I think the first thing to do is actually to get cutting. I've got to cut some pieces of styrene to make all of the edges, and I bought a piece of 1mm thick Perspex, which will be used to cut the top. So yeah, let's get cutting and start sticking this together and see if we can make this rather simple looking shape, and then we'll start adding all of the electronics to get the lights working.
Toy-polloi.
So there we go, that is the frame for the base made. As you can see, I did put an angle on the front. I've also cut a hole there for a switch because I thought on the other dioramas I put the batteries at the back so you can easily access them. On this one the battery will be underneath it. So a switch to switch the LEDs on and off is really vital. Now we need to cut a piece of perspex for the top, and I've bought some of this, which is a 1mm thick perspex sheet. I've just got to cut a piece of that out. Unfortunately this sheet has come with very rough edges, so I've actually got to cut a sort of bit out of the middle. I've made sure that everything is nice and square, but I've got to cut this piece out the middle, and I'm hoping it will be pretty straightforward to cut, just like the styrene sheet is. I don't think this works particularly well with the plastic weld, which is what I've stuck everything else together with, so I may have to super glue this on, but I'm hoping that will just fit there. As well, you can see at the back I've also put the little slot in, and that's where the sort of diorama background, the cardboard piece will fit. So you can see we have a 1mm slot all along the back. It's all about pre-planning with something like this. That's why I do a little diagram of what I want to cut and how I'm going to cut it. That way I end up with sort of very little waste. So yeah, let's cut the perspex and see if that fits on the top there. But you can see that's the sort of shape that we're going for. A nice little plinth with an angled front. And then we can worry about how to get the lights in and get everything shining through. There we go, there's the perspex sheet cut, and you can see that fits on very neatly onto the top. And I've just done a quick test to see if this works with plastic weld, and you can see those two pieces have bonded really firmly, so it does. That's really good news. And you can see my little stand as well is just high enough for the PP3 battery. I forgot to show you that in the shot before. So this now needs to be plastic welded onto the top there. But actually, before I'm going to do that, this perspex is completely clear, which is, you know, fantastic, but that's not actually the look I want. I want it to have a slight sort of frosted finish to it, because if I leave it completely clear, if I take off these two covering sheets, you'll be able to see the LED really clearly underneath everything, and I don't want that. So I think if I frost this up just by sanding it with some very fine grit sandpaper, that should hide the lights underneath. We are also going to be painting it as well, because I'm going to put some details on it and just leave 4 little discs where the light comes up. So let's get this all sanded just to give it that sort of slight frosting look, and then we'll plastic weld it in place, and that will be the sort of the basic base all put together, and we can start to see how it's going to look. As you can see, I've now got all of that stuck together, and it's starting to actually feel like a base. I've just placed the figures on here roughly to give myself an idea of where I want them to be, and actually from that I've drawn up a better plan, which is this, because I'm intending to have sort of circles underneath each of the figures with the light shining through. I'm going to paint the rest of this perspex so that you can't see through it, and this is the sort of plan that I've gone for. If I remove the figures, we can now drop this on, and that gives me an idea of where I need to actually start placing things, because I want to start placing the LEDs and sort of lighting bits underneath. So what I've done is I've marked out the 4 circles. That's where the figures will stand. I need to cut out a section here because that's where I put the switch. I need the section at the back, which is where the battery is going to go. I'm going to be using PP3 batteries, so you can see I've just sort of left a big enough space for that. And this I have now transferred onto a piece of black styrene. Well, it's actually grey styrene because I didn't have any black styrene. And I've cut everything out, and I've pre-drilled some holes because this is where the LEDs are going to go. And I can now sort of start putting this together just to see if it actually works. So let's have a go at that. I'm going to turn everything over. I'll show you where all the electronics are going to go, and we'll give it a quick test before we start actually doing some more of the construction. So this is now the underside of the actual display stand, and this is the underside of that piece that I've made. So you can see my plan is that this is going to sort of stick in here, or maybe I'll make a little bracket to hold it in place, and this is what the LEDs are going to fit into. They need to be a little bit away from the clear piece of perspex just so that we can get the sort of the most light out of them. I think that will work pretty nicely. So I have already roughly pre-wired some LEDs. I buy pre-wired LEDs off eBay, so they have a resistor already included with them. And these are some white 5mm diameter LEDs, of which I've got 4 of them, and I've then wired them into this little piece of chop block. And for now, I've put a connector for the battery on one end. In the end, it'll all be wired into this switch, but to test, we can just do a very quick bit of wiring like this. I've shown this sort of setup multiple times on videos where I'm adding lights to vintage toys. It's just a quick way of testing everything. So these LEDs need to be pushed through these holes, and the reason this is black is because when I turn it over like that, and if we turn the whole thing over, I want it to be black so you don't really see sort of through it. At the moment, if I remove that, you can see the green through it. So if we have black underneath everything, I think that will look pretty reasonable. And as I say, this is all going to be painted, and I'll be talking about that in a bit. So let's do a quick test. Let's put all of these LEDs in and see what it looks like and see if it actually lights up properly. So that panel is now sort of roughly held in place with the LEDs in the right positions, and I'm just going to plug in the batteries and we'll see what that looks like. Yeah, there we go. So we've got 4 lights. They are being diffused a bit by the sort of roughness that I put onto that surface. Let's stick a couple of figures onto this and see how they look. Oh yeah, they're definitely getting some light up. That's looking pretty nice. I might even try this now. Shall I switch the lights off and we'll see what that looks like? Let me switch my filming lights off, and we'll see how that's going. Yeah, there's definitely some light coming up. Obviously, we got far too much light because you can see everything, but I think the overall effect is going to work really nicely. So let's move on to sorting out the painting of this top surface, because I need to do all of that before I do the final wiring, because I still have to remove this switch to do the painting. So yeah, let's sort out the top, and I'll show you how I'm going to go about that. So obviously, as I've said, the top surface I want predominantly to be black, with just some sort of circles where the lights come out. So we just want a small area of the transparent material left, exactly in this pattern. And I've been trying to think how I was going to do it, and then it occurred to me actually stickers are going to be the answer. I just need to mask off the places that I don't want to paint. And I've done a quick test here. I bought myself some circular stickers. So this is just the same piece of that perspex. I've put a sticker over it and then I've sprayed it black, and you can see we've ended up with a really nice sort of thick black where the light will just come through that middle section. So we're going to be doing the same on this, and these are the stickers that I bought. I just went onto eBay, had a quick look around to see what I could get, and I found a couple of different sizes of circular stickers. So these are 35mm in diameter, and I've also bought some 40mm diameter ones as well, because my plan is to stick these smaller circles on, so the 35mm circles, and spray everything blue. I'm then going to stick over the top of that the 40mm stickers, which are these ones, and then I'll spray everything black, and that will leave me with a blue circle around the sort of clear piece and then black everywhere else. And I think that should look quite Tron-like. I may put some other lines in as well on the blue just to sort of snazz it up a bit and again make it look a little bit more Tron-like. But it's going to be a lot of masking, and again I can use this as my pattern. I'm actually going to stick that on the underside there so that I can stick the stickers in exactly the right spot and get everything looking right. Then I'll do the sort of spray painting. So it will start with an undercoat of a plastic primer, then I'm going to choose a blue from any paints that I have out in the garage, then I'm going to do a bit more masking, and then I'm going to paint it black. It's quite a complicated process, but I think the end results will look really nice. So let's get masking and taping. Everything is now painted black and you can just about see the masking that I put on. It's now time for the scary process. I've got to remove all of this masking tape and hope that everything has worked. If it hasn't, then it could be a complete waste of time. So let's carefully remove the masking tape and see what sort of patterns we're left with. We should have some blue lines and some blue circles with clear bits in the centre. So yeah, let's see if it's all worked. That came off really rather satisfyingly, and as you can see the lines are pretty crisp. There's a few little marks in it where I've scratched a bit of the blue or scratched a bit of the black, but overall the effect is exactly what I was after. We've now got these panels where lights will shine through and the rest of it is solid black with blue lines. It looks exactly how I was hoping. So yeah, very pleasing to see that actually work. I've just put the lights in temporarily so we can have a test again. So let's plug the battery in and we'll see what it looks like. Yep, and that is all working. We've got a nice amount of light coming through. I think I'm ready to actually now start putting in the electronics properly. So we need to turn this over, we'll wire in the plug and get everything sort of fixed in place, and then we can start designing the backdrop. But this is going really nicely. It's exactly what I was hoping. The wiring in place. I've kept it really simple. I've not even trimmed down any of the wires because I'm unsure as to whether I'm actually going to stick with these LEDs. I might buy some super bright ones. So for now I've left it fairly messy on the underside. I've basically wired in the switch and I've left all of the cables for the LEDs as long as they were originally, just attached to this chop block. It does sort of look a little bit messy, but everything is hidden inside, so it doesn't really matter. And the battery I've stuck on with a piece of Velcro. I've also made some tiny little brackets to hold this piece of styrene in place, so they just sort of clip in to bits around the edge. It's basically again a piece of styrene with a 1mm gap and then another piece of styrene, just so there's something for that to hold on to. And once I turn it over, you can see everything is hidden and it sits nice and flat on the floor, even though those wires are all loose. And the switch on the side now works. If I press that switch, you can see the lights come on. But we're still missing one final thing, and that is the back plate. I've originally sort of mocked it up just using this Temple of Doom one from Indiana Jones, just to sort of get the size of it right. So I'm now going to go into Photoshop and I'm going to make myself a background that specifically works with this. I think I'll most likely just use some stills from the movie itself just to make something quickly, and maybe in future I'll make something very specific for this base. But for now, let's make something using some stills from the movie and get it all put together. And here we go, here is the finished background. So this is just a still taken from the movie. I've done a little bit of Photoshop to remove any characters that are in it, and this is just a hallway it looks like. And then here we have a control room. Again, a little bit of Photoshop just to remove some of the characters and sort of build the edges out. Let's put this all together and I'll show you what the final diorama looks like. And here we go, here is the finished little mini diorama display for Disney's Tron, and I am so happy with how this turned out. At the start of this video I had an idea in my mind of what this display would look like, and it's really turned out very close to what I was imagining. The base itself is actually a fair amount of work. It's much more complicated than some of the previous bases that I have made, mainly because I had to layer up the paint in a certain way so that I ended up with the 4 discs in the middle that the lights could shine through. There's probably an easier way of doing this, but I'm really pleased with how this turned out. As you can see, the backdrops really do finish this piece off, and I can easily swap those over, so I've got a couple of different backgrounds, and maybe in future I will make some more of those. If you want to grab the files that I've created for this, then you'll have to head on over to my Patreon page. These will be Patreon exclusive files, and if you've enjoyed this video, then why not check out some of the other projects that I've worked on making mini dioramas. So far, as you saw at the start, I've done some Star Wars ones, I've done an Indiana Jones one, I've done one for Disney's The Black Hole, and I've also done one for Star Trek The Motion Picture, and I'm sure I will be doing many more in future. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it and want to help me out here at toy-polloi, then why not think about becoming a Patreon of the channel. You get early access to all of my restoration videos, plus access to an exclusive video series called On the Cutting Mat, where you'll see projects and restorations that you won't see anywhere else. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.